Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, July the 9th, 2024. So when you think of state terrorism, you kind of think of Iran and the United States, but really lots of different countries are capable of state terrorism. And tomorrow is July the 10th, so today is July the 9th, tomorrow is July the 10th, and tomorrow is actually the 39th anniversary of a major piece of state terrorism that was actually enacted by France. And this was the blowing up of the Rainbow Warrior in Auckland Harbour in New Zealand. So I think the situation was that France at the time was doing nuclear tests, and the Rainbow Warrior was a ship run or owned by Greenpeace, and they were trying to, I don't know quite what they were doing, but they were apparently trying to interfere with France's tests, or at least that's how France saw it, and it was seen as a threat to French national security. So the French sent some agents to New Zealand and they blew the thing up, and a photographer drowned in the process. So I thought we would briefly look at that event. Now, the reason we might want to look at that event is to see if it actually works in terms of France's national horoscope. And there are different horoscopes for France. I mean, the one I've been using in the past was for July the 14th, 1789, the beginning of the French Revolution, an incredible symbolic event. But when I look at the comments on my channel, I think there are some people from France who are suggesting that's perhaps not the chart I should be using, but I should actually be looking at the horoscope for the Fifth Republic, because every now and then, after the revolution, France changes its constitution and has a sort of change in the way it runs itself. So we had the First Republic, the Second Republic, Third, Fourth, and then 1958 we had the Fifth Republic. So that sounds pretty straightforward at first sight. You take a chart for the Fifth Republic. But then the question is, which chart do you take? Now, I was looking at a very recent comment on my channels suggesting that the key date is October the 4th, 1958, which I think it was, when it was voted through. No, hold on, that was when I think it was supposedly promulgated, but whatever that means, by the French Prime Minister. But there are alternative dates, because they had a referendum on the Fifth Republic on, I think, September the 28th, 1958. And if you look at Astro Theme, you have a chart for what I think is the closing of the polls on September the 28th. And then you had the chart, which I believe Nick Campion, the astrologer Nick Campion, who wrote his book of world horoscopes, I believe he doesn't take the 4th, he takes October the 6th, because I think that's when some formal council officially put the seal on it. So you've actually got three possible charts for the Fifth Republic, and I want to look at some of those charts. But why would I be wanting to look at them? Because we've had stuff going on in France right now. We've had the election results, and these election results were actually pretty inevitable. Everyone was saying what the results would be. There was all this excitement that Marine Le Pen and her supposed far-right national rally would get a majority, and that she'd become prime minister, and it would, all be a disaster. Of course, France has two rounds of voting, and so the first round, the national rally did really well, but then of course you had people dropping out, and you had this sort of alliance against Marine Le Pen, and so in the end she didn't do quite so well in terms of seats. I think her grouping got, or at least her party did third best. The person who did best was, or the grouping that did best was something I think it's a New Popular Front, and the main component was this party, La France is Insoumise, which I think means rebellious France, correct me if I'm wrong, and led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And then you had another grouping that was Emmanuel Macron's grouping, did second best, and then Marine Le Pen's grouping came in third place. I mean, yeah, some people on the right are saying how unfair that is, but I suppose it's a kind of proportional representation, and having two rounds, it's inevitable that you're going to get these kind of changes. I know it's not quite proportional representation; it's a kind of a type of proportional representation where you give, you have two rounds where you. I suppose it's fairer. I mean, what, she got about a third of the votes, Marine Le Pen, so she got about a third of the seats. I don't quite see the injustice here that some people on the right are claiming. But still, it does create a lot of problems for France. And I thought I would look at some charts, not just the chart of some of the charts of the Fifth Republic, but the charts of some of the people involved, specifically Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, who is another very young politician for the National Rally, and also look at Mélenchon's chart and, of course, Macron's chart. So there's quite a lot to look at. I mean, I hope I'm going to have time to look at it all, but the focus in this video is very much going to be France. But before I look at France, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, July the 9th, 2024. Now, I'm talking about France. I just should make it clear. I don't really know a great deal about France. I'm very interested in what's going on in France politically, but that doesn't mean to say I know anything about it. So when I do talk about France, consider the possibility that I'll get some stuff wrong. So, this is an astrology channel, not a politics channel. I'm very relieved it's not a politics channel, because if I was running a politics channel, it would be a disaster, because I just would not be clear enough about my facts. Okay, so today there really is not a great deal going on. I'm really hoping that I can keep my forecast of the 12 signs pretty brief. So just let's have a look. So you can see that the moon at noon is just going into Virgo. So it's made a square to Uranus, which there's Uranus at Taurus, in 26 Taurus, getting ever closer to the fixed star Algol, but not quite there yet. And so the moon has made the square to Uranus, and then it's changing, and then it changes sign. Sorry, I should have checked what time it changes sign. So it changes sign at 14:47, at about 2:45 in the afternoon if you're in the UK. So that would be 9:45 in the morning if you're in New York, 6:45 in the morning if you're in California, even earlier if you're in Alaska or Hawaii. So if you're in the Americas, it's pretty much a moon in Virgo day. If you're in Europe, this afternoon, the moon changes sign. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, then really it's a moon in Leo day. Now, as the moon is changing sign, that does mean that the moon is close to the fixed star Regulus, the royal star. So it's a kind of royal part of the zodiac. So it may be a time when many of us can interact with important people. It's all relative, isn't it? The important person could be your boss, it could be the king. Depends what opportunities you have. But when you're interacting with people, try to reach out to people who are as important as is feasible. And this is especially the case if there is something you want. Now might be the time to do it. At the same time, we've got Mars conjunct Uranus. So that's getting closer. Not there yet. It's, about another week? Mars is getting ever closer, though, to that conjunction with Uranus. Some of us are starting to feel it. It's less than 5 degrees apart. Things are becoming more tense. People are getting a little bit more angry, perhaps rebellious. Maybe especially if you're in France. We've got sort of governmental instability in the run-up to this Mars-Uranus conjunction. And with the moon moving from Leo to Virgo, there is a bit of a change. I think that with the moon in Leo, that is the spark. It's a fire sign. And the moon is the only planet in a fire sign while it's in Leo. But, because, sorry, that's not true. Mercury's in Leo. Let me rephrase that. When Mercury moves into Virgo, we've only got one planet in fire sign. So we've got Mercury in Leo, which is better for nothing. But perhaps when we had Moon in Leo and Mercury in Leo, there was that spark, and we were able to communicate in quite an exciting way. And certainly, if you're in Australia and New Zealand and East Asia, you've got Moon in Leo all day. But if you're in the Americas, for example, then Moon moves out of Leo into Virgo. Perhaps some of the spark dissipates. So there is a difference there. And of course, with Moon in Virgo, we start to become more focused on details. It's more about the material world, trying to understand things through what we can see and touch, rather than through these one-off, coming from nowhere intuitions. So there is a bit of a difference there. But I must emphasize that there is only one real major aspect going on today, and that is Moon square Mercury, Moon square Uranus. And so, because Moon square Uranus is the most important aspect today, and there isn't really much else going on aspect-wise in a sort of geocentric sense. Maybe that Moon square Uranus gets added importance. If you're in the Americas, that Moon square Uranus maybe not quite so relevant, and so that goes back to what I was suggesting, that maybe it's a day when not a great deal is actually going on, at least astrologically. Though I should point out that the Sun is making a semi-square to the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. That does provide at least some point of excitement. So with the Sun aspecting the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, some of us actually might feel a sense of relief. There might have been something that we were worried about, and we were just concerned about how it was going to work out. Then all of a sudden we might get evidence that it's all okay. So if there is something you're worried about, then perhaps you should be looking around for reassurance, and then you might actually suddenly get the reassurance that you are looking for. Turning to the heliocentric picture, let's do this. Here we are. So this is the solar system from the heliocentric perspective. And when you're looking at the heliocentric perspective, you can get a somewhat different picture, though in this case I don't think that a great deal is actually happening. All we can really point out is the fact that the Earth is still square Mars, but I suppose we could say that the Earth is on the squaring the Mars Chiron midpoint. So there's Mars at 1530 Aries, Chiron at 2018 Aries. So the midpoint is going to be around 1718 Aries. So Earth square Mars Chiron. For some of us, that might be the impulse to do things differently and not care how people respond. It may be that we have to, but we just want to show how different we are. But we are the maverick Chiron. Chiron Mars conjunction, you could say, that is putting a lot of energy into doing things differently, wanting to be different. So that might be how Earth square the Mars Chiron midpoint works. It could also be about feeling we have to actually do something to make the world better, or to make perhaps someone better. If someone is in trouble or has a wound or is being treated badly, maybe we might feel that we actually have to step in, and we don't care what anyone else says. It's a matter of moral obligation. So that might be the best way of seeing Earth square the Mars Chiron midpoint. It's not a time to stand by in the face of injustice or someone being treated badly, someone being bullied. It is a time when we actually have to make our presence felt. So that's the main thing going on from a heliocentric perspective. So let's now look at the astrology for the 12 signs. And I must emphasize there is not a great deal going on. I'm hoping I can be briefer than usual when I go through the 12 signs, because there's no point in me just saying stuff just for the sake of it. Okay, so these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, July the 9th, 2024. Aries. It's kind of a time of transition for you. You really do understand what you're capable of doing. I think you have a sense of your own power, and I suppose also a sense of your limitation. There are certain things, at least in the short term, you recognize that you can do, but I think you're also very aware that you have your limits. And having understood that situation, you can perhaps start to reconfigure your life. And life, I suppose it sounds a bit dramatic. This is only a forecast just for the day, but it's about working within your limits, Aries, and understanding your limits. And it's possible that there might be, particularly at the beginning of the day, there might be a surprise frustration. Something happens and you just recognize that there's really not much you can do. And if you were to run after it, if you were to try to put a lot of energy into it, then it might just not work out. And hopefully you'll recognize this. And having recognized this, you'll be able to focus on what you can do rather than what you would like to be doing. And as the moon moves into Virgo, then you get a sense of how you need to organize yourself. Moon in Virgo is about organization. It's about streamlining. It's about removing all the stuff that is unnecessary, that you can't make use of. Maybe you can put it into storage, but it shouldn't be around to distract you. It's all about making the most of what you have and packing in as powerful a punch as you possibly can, but again, not taking things too far. And also with the moon in Virgo, it's very important that you focus on your health. Okay, this is especially the case if you're in the Americas, because the moon is going to be in Virgo for most of the day. If you're in Europe or Africa, then okay, the moon moves into Virgo a bit later in the afternoon. But Australia, New Zealand, that's something about tomorrow. But your health does matter, and if you overload yourself and if you take on too much, you're going to exhaust yourself and you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. And you might actually feel a minor aspect between the moon and Pluto. So as the moon moves into Virgo, it makes a quincunx, an 150-degree aspect to Pluto. And so that moon quincunx Pluto may just make you aware of what you can't do. And if you do push yourself too far, because you keep on going, you think that you can just carry on all fronts regardless, then I think Pluto will quickly remind you that you're taking things too far. So do act within your limits, Aries, and then I think that it can be a satisfactory day, but certainly you shouldn't be expecting fireworks. Taurus. Now, Taurus, you do put a great premium on stability. You like everything to be where you expect it to be. You don't really want surprises. I think that can be an important part of being a Taurus, because Taurus is a fixed sign. But today there could be a little bit of instability. Things just happening that you weren't really expecting, especially first at the beginning of the day, especially if you're in Europe, Asia, Australia, maybe not quite so much if you're in the Americas, but still your basic grounding might be apparently threatened, or it might feel as if it's being threatened. Something's just happening that perhaps forces you to change your plans, and you perhaps have to consider what might be creating the instability. And it may actually just be your own stubbornness, just feeling that just something should be done in a particular way. You want it done your way, and it's difficult to consider other approaches. And this is especially the case if there are other people around you, perhaps members of your family. Members of your family have different priorities, and it just may be difficult to give full respect to other people's priorities. And at the same time, if anyone wants to change their plans or cancel or turn up uninvited, you might take offence, because you have a particular way you'd like things to be done. And I would urge you to try to be reasonable. You can't expect everything to be carefully planned. You can't expect everything to happen exactly as planned. And so you must create a little bit of leeway for things to happen that you just weren't expecting. And then the moon does move into Virgo. Now, moon moving into Virgo will not affect you if you are in Australia or New Zealand. Okay, maybe affect you very late in the evening, but I think that's more about tomorrow. But with the moon in Virgo, there is a change, and I actually think it could be quite a fortunate change, moon moving from Leo to Virgo. So remember, this change happens, around 2:45 in the afternoon, London time, 9:45 in the morning, New York time, even earlier on the West Coast. So with the moon moving into Virgo, the moon is moving into an earth sign. And of course, Taurus, you are also an earth sign. So there might be a sense that things are starting to calm down and that you can be yourself. You can do the things you want to do. And you can also do stuff which is quite creative. Ideally, doing creative stuff with things that are really real, things that you can touch. So it's a great day for sort of making things, or perhaps for doing art, or doing stuff which is really detailed but is also very attractive and beautiful. That is something that you should really try to engage with if you possibly can. But there may be a certain but a certain challenge, that's probably a better word, when the moon moves into Virgo. And a challenge relates to the fact that the moon does make a quincunx to Pluto, 150-degree aspect between the moon and Pluto. So with this quincunx between the moon and Pluto, I suppose the challenge might be like this. You know what you're good at. It's absolutely clear what you're good at. You know it. You don't have to be told. Yet, at the same time, you have to be recognized for what you're good at. You want to make an impression. You want people to not just notice what you're doing, but in a way you want people to also be changed by what you're doing. And that could be hard work. You might do something, and in the first instance, people don't fully recognize or appreciate what's going on. And you may actually feel that you're being judged, and that might make you self-conscious. So you have to create a situation where you are doing what is important to you, but you are also taking into account the gaze of the outside world. And that would especially be the case if you were involved in something to do with career, or you're trying to boost your status in society, and you're trying to do that. You're trying to address the world out there, but you're also trying to be yourself. And it's a bit of a battle, but it's a quincunx. And with a quincunx, there is always a way of dealing with the issue. I had this astrology teacher in the 80s, and he was talking about quincunxes, and he said a quincunx was like, I think he said it was like a pipe that is slightly bent. And this man, his name was Ron Gwynn. He taught the certificate course at the Faculty of Astrological Studies. And anyway, he said the quincunx was, it was like a bent pipe, and you're looking for somewhere to put this pipe because it's just weirdly shaped, and there's nowhere to put it, and it's just really confusing. And so you have to find where to put this pipe with this moon quincunx Pluto. And that pipe is all about this connection between how you can do something wonderful, but at the same time get the recognition and appreciation you feel you deserve. Yeah, it's clumsy, it's a problem, but there's a way to fix it, and there's a way to put it in the right place. So that's perhaps something for you to be working on today. Gemini. Well, Mercury is in Leo. It's obviously still in Leo. There's nothing much going on with Mercury. As far as I can see, Mercury doesn't really make any aspects that I can see, so no sort of major aspects there, but still you have a lot of work there with Mercury in Leo, because the moon is moving out of Leo into Virgo, so Mercury is now going to be the only planet in a fire sign. Okay, unless you count Chiron in Aries, or perhaps a North Node in Aries. So that indicates that you may feel that you are having to try very, very hard to keep up the excitement. It's difficult, and you might just feel that people are not as appreciative as they should be, but you want to get people going. You want to create a buzz. Though, one aspect, there is an aspect, one has to look a bit hard for it, but it's there. Mercury is actually trine the North Node. So North Node is in Aries, and I think that is suggesting, Gemini, that actually is the right thing to be doing, to be trying your hardest to get people engaged, to get people enthused. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to perhaps keep trying, and it may be about trial and error. You say one thing, you get ignored. You say another thing, it doesn't seem to hit the right notes. So you have to keep playing with the words and not feel dejected or rejected by people's reaction. Just keep trying to change the wording. Keep trying to change your approach. And I think in the end, Gemini, you can finally say the right thing. And people think all of a sudden, Gemini's got something exciting to say. And then you're going to feel that, it's all happening, you're doing the right thing, and you're on the right track. Now, you may find that at some point in the day, you can't really say any more. You've done your bit. And that's especially the case if you are in, I suppose if you're in the Americas, the moon moves from Leo to Virgo sort of in the morning. So when the moon moves from Leo to Virgo, you might just feel that you've said your bit and you can't really say much more because it becomes harder work. But no, you've got to keep going. Just because the moon moves from Leo to Virgo doesn't mean you have to slow down. You have to take things more seriously. You have to be a little more grounded. But if you can be more grounded, that may actually make it easier for you to get your message across. It may be all about being exciting, but actually saying something which is relevant to other people. Relevance matters. And if you want to get people's attention, it's not perhaps enough to be exciting, to use bold words, perhaps to be a bit outrageous. You have to say something which actually means something to your audience, to their lives. So you have to make the right choice. But once you address another person's security issues, the things that really matter to them, I think that you will get their attention pretty quickly. Though, Gemini, this moon moving from Leo to Virgo does create a change. It is a time when you're going to feel a need to start to calm down, to start to ground yourself, perhaps to focus more energy in terms of your home and family. So whether you feel the moon moving into Virgo this morning if you're in the Americas, or this afternoon if you're in Europe, or late this evening if you're in Australia, New Zealand. Whenever you feel the moon moving into Virgo, it is a time to be more serious, to be more grounded. And there's also the question of what you have to ground. I use this word ground. It's just perhaps it's an overused word, but what are you actually trying to ground? And Moon is making a quincunx to Pluto, and so that Pluto in Aquarius may be about some of your loftier ideas. And so you've got lofty ideas, which in themselves are completely unrealistic. But with the moon in Virgo, you have to look at these ideas very closely, look at what is possible, look at what is plain fantasy, and then distill the whole thing into something realistic and make it a functional part of your life. Cancer. It's probably a bit of a relief when the moon moves out of Leo and into Virgo. The moon doesn't really work particularly well in Leo. Although I understand that right now the moon is in mutual reception with the sun. So the moon is in Leo. Okay, it changes sign this morning if you're in the Americas, this afternoon if you're in Europe, late this evening if you're in Australia, New Zealand. So the moon has the advantage of being in mutual reception with the sun. And so I think that does give you a certain amount of strength. And by mutual reception, I mean the sun is in Cancer, which is the moon's sign. The moon is in Leo, which is the sun sign. So there was a sense of comfort there, a sense that you were able to gain strength from different parts of your life, and you were able, if you were weak in one place, you could move somewhere else, and you always knew how to move things around to make sure that your strength was maximized with that moon sextile sun mutual reception. But all things being equal, it's just a bit dry and hot, the moon in Leo. And so with the moon moving into Virgo, it just may feel easier. The moon in Virgo. It's an earth sign. There's a natural affinity between Virgo and Cancer, which I think you're going to very much feel as the moon makes that sign change, and perhaps you can be less concerned about money, because money with moon in Leo, there was stuff you could do with money. Money may have been an issue for you with moon in Leo, maybe something you felt you had to work on, but with moon in Virgo you can perhaps start to consider other things, and you may take the view that you can perhaps express yourself a little bit better without having to worry too much about how other people are going to respond. But as the moon moves into Virgo, it just may be that some Cancerians feel that really they want to keep things to themselves. Yeah, you could say what's on your mind, but do you want to? And possibly the answer is no, because as the moon moves into Virgo, it makes a quincunx with Pluto, and that moon quincunx Pluto could be a little bit heavy. You just feel that there's something you don't want to talk about. It feels serious, and you're not quite sure how other people are going to respond. And so, yeah, it's best to just keep it to yourself. Now, is that the right approach? I'm not convinced it is. I think with this moon quincunx Pluto, there is a way of saying something in a way that doesn't compromise you at all, but at the same time it makes an impression and it forces people to think. And perhaps that's a challenge. You have to force people to think and force people to take something seriously, which in the past they haven't been taking seriously. And I do think that's something you can do, and I think you can do it in such a way that you won't cause offense. Leo. The moon is in very late Leo, and in fact it moves into Virgo. When it moves into Virgo kind of depends. It could be this morning if you're in the Americas, could be this afternoon if you're in Europe, could be late this evening if you're in Australia, New Zealand. And this part of the sky between Leo and Virgo is occupied by Regulus, which is the royal star. And so the moon is conjunct Regulus. And Regulus can represent important people, people who have influence, people who, you should ideally be in contact with. So consider what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do, and ask yourself who can be of assistance. And don't be shy. So Leo, if there's someone important who you feel you need to be in touch with, now might be the time to try to make contact. Now, when I say important, it's all relative. It depends on your situation. It just, it might be someone at work, as I said at the beginning. It might even be a king. It might be. It just depends on who is important to you, because I suppose we're talking about status. And I know we're not supposed to talk about status because, we're now in a world where everything is supposed to be non-hierarchical, but reality is hierarchies always exist. So I suppose when I say important, I'm just talking about someone who just has a higher level up the hierarchy than you. We're all in that situation, aren't we? There's always someone above us. So that might be how Regulus works. So don't be shy. Now, as far as which part of the day is better, I suppose probably the beginning of the day is likely to be better than the last part of the day, simply because the moon is in Leo, it's in your sign, it's also in mutual reception to the sun. So the moon is in Leo, which is in a sign ruled by the sun. The sun is in Cancer, which is a sign ruled by the moon. So with with moon in Leo, you're on best form at the beginning of the day. So that means that if you're in the Americas, well, perhaps you should get up early, maybe super early if you're in California, because the moon goes into Leo, I think, at around 6:45. Yeah, 6:45 in the morning. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, you've got all day, haven't you? Because the moon doesn't move into Leo until, in fact, probably tomorrow. So bide your time. Well, don't completely bide your time. There is work to be done. So do take advantage of moon in Leo if you possibly can. But eventually moon goes into Virgo, and if you're in California, moon in Virgo is probably going to be in Virgo pretty much when you wake up. So with moon in Virgo, it is a bit of a change, and you feel that there is work to be done. It's all a little bit serious, and I think that you will be quick to notice the imperfections in things, and perhaps the imperfections in terms of how you are being rewarded you will look at money, and money will actually perhaps be an important token of something. It will be a sign of recognition. For Leo, recognition is always important. So money is going to have a special significance today. And if you are not being properly rewarded, you're going to feel it. Now, you might not be able to communicate that straight away, but I think that it's going to be something that you're going to be thinking about a lot. And many Leos, as the day progresses, just may feel that it's not good enough and that things have to change in a financial sense. And perhaps you'll also be aware that money has a social impact. It's not just about how much you have in the bank. Relative wealth differences are going to get you more than usual. If you have more or less money than someone else, then I think you'll be thinking about that. I know we're not supposed to think about that. Money doesn't mean anything, but let's face it, it does mean something. It has become such a token of human worth, hasn't it, money? So there is that temptation to think about relative discrepancies between how much you have and how much another person has. And it works both ways. You may be very aware that you've got more money than someone else. So it does work both ways. But it does seem that the financial dimension and how people handle money can actually have an impact on relationships. Okay, not necessarily super close relationships, people maybe you live with, but all your connections with others, money can't quite be avoided. And if you and other people are jointly paying for something, I don't know, perhaps for example, if you're having a meal and at the end of the meal everyone is paying a bill, everyone's supposed to pay their fair share, but it just could become an issue for some reason. So don't underestimate money, Leo. Don't just say, oh, it doesn't matter, because it does matter. Even if it's stupid that it does matter, it does matter. So I would suggest, Leo, that you take money seriously today, because if you don't take it seriously, then it will take you seriously. Virgo. The moon is edging into your sign. And Virgo, that kind of depends where you are. If you're in the Americas, then the moon will be moving into Virgo this morning. And so you're going to have moon in Virgo all day long. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then you don't really have to worry about it. The moon kind of goes into Virgo tomorrow or very, very late this evening. But in general, the moon is either going into your sign or it is about to go into your sign. And in general, I would have said that was a good thing. There is a sense in which you're feeling yourself to be quite well organized, that you know how to organize the world around you and make sure everything is in the right place, and at the same time you're going to be aware of what is happening in your material world. And the material world is not just about money, it's about the environment. It's what's in the environment. It's what chemicals are in the environment, what chemicals are in your food. You're going to be more sensitive than usual, and you're going to be more aware than usual. So if you, for example, come across any report in the internet about chemicals and what you're breathing in, it's going to have an impact. there's always articles, for example, about PFAS. Those forever chemicals, which just are in everything. They permeate our bodies, our food, and they can apparently be toxic at really, really minuscule concentrations, like, the equivalent of a few grains of rice in an Olympic, or a few grains of sand in an Olympic swimming pool or something like that. So that kind of thing is something you're going to be aware of. Now, of course, Virgo, it's just important that you don't get too obsessed. Now, you could get obsessed about health in certain situations. Okay, it's not an issue if you're in New Zealand today, but because that moon doesn't really go into Virgo until tomorrow. But the moon, as it moves into Virgo, it makes a quincunx, 150-degree aspect to Pluto. And so with a moon making a quincunx to Pluto, there is plenty of scope for getting quite obsessed. Some little detail just drives you crazy. Once you realize that something is the case, you can't stop. Yeah, and that might be about health and something you want to get absolutely right. You may feel that there's a contaminant that needs to be removed. Well, is that really possible? Unfortunately, all of us are at some level contaminated, aren't we? I've got plutonium in my teeth, apparently. When I was born, there was still nuclear testing, and you can actually, the people born around the time of nuclear tests, they can pick up tiny amounts of plutonium in their teeth. And I think didn't they do this study where they looked at lots of baby teeth of, I think, maybe people born in the 60s when teeth had fallen out, and they analysed them. They were full of plutonium, and so you can actually perhaps age someone and see what was going on in someone's life by looking at the plutonium in their teeth. So some things just can't be avoided. And yeah, I've got plutonium in my teeth, and there's nothing I can do about it, except lose all my teeth and get extractions. But then, I don't know. That's the point. We cannot avoid contamination. It's just the way it goes. And so it's just important not to get obsessed about it. It's only worth getting obsessed about something if you can actually do something about it. And it may be that you can do something about some contaminants or some things in your life that aren't right with Moon quincunx Pluto. Pluto is about elimination. It's about getting rid of things that are no longer serving any useful purpose. So ask yourself, what can be got rid of which is feasible? Something in your life that's no longer serving any useful purpose, is just making things difficult for you. Yeah, see what you can do. Because I think, Virgo, that actually you can get rid of it. It's not as difficult as you'd imagined. And I don't think you want to really make a big fuss about it. You have your own concerns, and I know we're supposed to talk about one's concerns, but maybe this is a time when you shouldn't be talking about your particular obsessions. Instead, you can either work them through, if they're things you can do nothing about, or you can take private action to eliminate the things that need to get eliminated. Libra. You may feel at the moment that you're slowing down. You feel perhaps that you don't have quite as much energy as you used to have, and as far as other people are concerned, maybe they're just becoming a little too much of a good thing. And, as the moon moves out of Leo into Virgo, you might really start to appreciate your own company. Now, this does depend to an extent where you are. The moon does move into Virgo early in the morning if you're in the Americas. If you're in the Americas, really all day, you're going to perhaps feel that you don't really need to be with other people. It's just not necessary, and if you do have to deal with other people, it just may be a pain, it may be annoying. If you're in other parts of the world, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, Europe, then for much of the day the moon is moving through Leo. In fact, it might be all of the day if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia. And so with the moon moving through Leo, in that situation, there may be just people you have to deal with, but even then it may not be satisfactory, because you could be feeling this aspect between the moon in Leo and Uranus in Taurus. So having to deal with people could be just a pain, and people could just be stubborn for the sake of it, and getting people to move or change their minds could just not be worth the effort. And if you're trying to impress anyone, or if you're trying to have an impact on the society around you, it could be hard work, and things may just happen that you weren't expecting, that you hadn't planned for, that you can't really respond to. So Libra, wherever you are in the world, I think it is possibly a good idea if you make some effort to withdraw, though be careful what you think about. It seems that some Librans, regardless of where you are, might have some somewhat disturbing ideas which may be excessively pessimistic, or in fact could be excessively morbid. You might just find yourself thinking about the absolute worst thing that can possibly happen and start to fixate on it, and that might upset your peace of mind, and matters might not be helped if you find yourself talking to the wrong people. Some people can actually be disturbing. That's perhaps another reason why you should keep a distance from the social world. Some people can be disturbing. It can be they talking about strange stuff that really shouldn't be talked about, and you find that upsetting, because Librans, they do have a balance. They do have a sense that everything should be nice, everything should be very human, and we don't want complications. That can just be a general Libran way of looking at things, and not wanting the grossness of the world to be out there and visible. And perhaps the grossness of the world is going to be in front of you, and that's not going to be to your liking, and that could just upset your peace of mind, and then that could wreck your day. So perhaps you need to maybe censor what you're hearing and what you're seeing. Now, I understand that ignorance shouldn't be regarded as bliss. We should always work on the basis of full knowledge. But maybe today, just temporarily, maybe tomorrow as well, but just temporarily, Libra, you should perhaps censor what's coming in, because there just might be some stuff coming in that just might upset your equilibrium for absolutely no reason, doesn't help you, doesn't make the world a better place, doesn't make you feel comfortable, just is not helpful, and just puts you in the wrong place. So that, Libra, possibly is the approach you should be taking. However, as I said yesterday, Venus is starting to leave Cancer. It's now Tuesday. Venus is 27 and a half degrees Cancer, 2.5 degrees time. Venus moves out of Cancer into Leo. I think it's is it Friday? It moves moves into Leo. Let's just check that. It moves into Leo on the 11th, that's actually Thursday. Sorry, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so in fact on Thursday Venus moves into Leo. And with Venus moving through the last degrees of Cancer, there may be something you need to sort out. And you may not have all the time in the world. So, yes, I'm suggesting that you perhaps distance yourself from the social world. But that's not an invitation to do nothing. There are things that need to be done. Perhaps they need to be done in your own way, when you don't have disturbances, when you don't get people presenting you with just distracting and disturbing information, which is a complete waste of time. So you don't want that. So give yourself space, but do something useful. That, Libra, I think, is really important. And then in a couple of days' time, once you've done whatever you have to do, you'll be in a better position to take on the world and hopefully to really make an impact. Scorpio, you are in a sort of time period of your life, period of a week, when things are changing, and it does kind of depend on where you are to an extent. Now, if you are in Eurasia, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, Europe, then the moon is going to be in Leo for really most of the day, especially the case if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And so with the moon in Leo, I do think that you need to be very focused on what you can do, because the moon in Leo is actually quite well placed. Now, all things being equal, the moon has a bit of a problem in Leo because, generally speaking, the moon doesn't have any dignity in Leo. However, at the moment, the sun is in Cancer. So that means that there is a mutual reception between the sun and the moon. So the sun is in Cancer, which is the sign ruled by the moon, and the moon is in Leo, a sign ruled by the sun. And with the moon moving in through Leo, and it will be moving through Leo if you're in Europe until the mid-afternoon, all day if you're in Australia or New Zealand. This is a time when you can really make an impact, when you can tell the world who you are and what you want. And I think you will further benefit by the fact that the moon is conjunct the fixed star Regulus. Regulus is the royal star. It's about getting recognized. It's about being able to link up with important people. So, Scorpio, really do try to take advantage of this, because I think just as the moon starts to move out of Leo, you get an opportunity to make a real impact, and I think people will really appreciate what you have to offer. Now, if you're in the Americas, you might feel, oh, well, that's too bad, because by the time you get up, the moon is pretty much out of Leo. But still, the moon is conjunct Regulus in the first few degrees of Leo. Of Virgo, it's still conjunct Regulus. So if you're in the Americas and you want to take advantage of everything that's on offer, it may actually be a good idea to get up early. I mean, I know that the Americans do get up relatively early, at least compared to people in the UK. I think people in the UK tend not to be great early risers. In America, try to get up early, try to take advantage of everything that's happening. And even if you don't get up early, the moon is still going to be pretty close to Regulus. So moon conjunct Regulus is going to give you a chance to link up with people that matter. And even when the moon is in Virgo, moon in Virgo from a Scorpio view is quite a sociable sign. It's a sociable sign for the moon to be in. So you can engage. And I think that it's all about getting things right. Now, Scorpio, the moon, when it moves into Virgo, it does make a quincunx with Pluto. That's an 150-degree aspect with Pluto. And this quincunx with Pluto, I think, is going to affect you, certainly if you're in the Americas, probably if you're in Europe, Africa as well. But it's really really in the Americas, it really is important, this moon quincunx Pluto. So what this quincunx is about is feeling that you want to be sociable. You want to be out there. You want to be mixing with people. You kind of feel that it's important. But at the same time, it's quincunx Pluto. Pluto doesn't want to be too sociable. Pluto doesn't want to take risks. Pluto is always advising caution. It doesn't want you to reveal anything about yourself. And of course, that's a message that Scorpios so often like to hear. Scorpios do like to keep things private. They don't like to tell the world what's on their mind. And certainly they don't want to tell the world what they're feeling. So you might then be in a situation where you are mixing with people. There are people to talk to, but you're not giving anything away. And of course, if you're not giving anything away, then nothing can happen. We always have to give something away. I mean, that is the heart, I think, of any genuine social connection. People know if we're not prepared to give anything away. So perhaps you shouldn't be so precious about some of the more marginal aspects of your experience and your thoughts. There are things on the margin that you can give away. It doesn't matter if people know about it. It's not going to hurt you. And you've perhaps got to make the distinction. Yeah, sure, some things you've got to keep secret. That's true. Some things are private. But there are other things that you can share. And probably the things that you share are things that someone knows about anyway. You perhaps kind of pretend they don't, but they know about it anyway. You can share it. And just a little bit of sharing with that moon quincunx Pluto is just going to make all the difference. And finally, I suppose I should point out that Mars is getting closer to Uranus. I know it's a week away, that Mars-Uranus conjunction, but it's there. And it does mean that there could be times when you are accident prone. In fact, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, then there may be a time, very early in the day when the moon is actually making a square to the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So be careful if you're in Australasia and you have with that moon square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Things could go wrong. You might just do something without thinking it through and get yourself into trouble. So a bit of caution might be required there. So do consider that. So I know I said finally, but there's one other final point I'd make to Scorpios is that regardless of where you are, you can come over in a way that is authoritative. It will be quite clear that you are someone who knows what they're doing and can be trusted. Of course, as I said earlier, you're going to have to share a little. You can't just be a stream of one-way authority telling people to do stuff and not accepting any feedback. And then no one's going to take you seriously. But if there can be a bit of to and fro, listening, putting stuff out, revealing a little bit about yourself, then I think that your presence will be very clear, and I think that people will be prepared to take you seriously. Sagittarius, you're feeling that you've got something to offer. You're very clear, Sagittarius, that you've got something to offer. And I think that Sagittarius, you're just looking for an opportunity to get people to listen to you, take you seriously, and also you want to be in a position where you can help, where you can, maybe make the world a better place. So the question is, to what extent are people going to take you seriously? I think they are. I think there's no doubt about that. But Sagittarius, you may have to make the effort to assert yourself a little bit. Today, you can be assertive. You can really push forward the power of your personality, and people will really take it seriously, and they'll just take the view that you mean business. And I therefore think it's important that you don't doubt yourself and that you have a high level of confidence. And this is further emphasized by the fact that the moon is conjunct the fixed star Regulus. So what's happening is that the moon is moving from Leo to Virgo, and as it moves from Leo to Virgo, it touches this fixed star, which is the royal star, connected with recognition, the company of important and maybe even famous people, and that can be you, or at least you have the opportunity to really meet people of significance. I mean, if you make the effort, obviously you've got to make a little bit of an effort, but even if it's not about other people, famous people, important people, it can be about you really being able to make your presence felt as the moon moves from Leo to Virgo. And I know I go on and on about time zones, but I don't think it actually matters. It's just that whole movement from late Leo to late Virgo, from late Leo to early Virgo, is something that you really pick up on. And this does encourage you to really make an impression. So I think that is something that you can definitely do, though possibly you have to choose your words carefully. Words matter. I think you know that words matter. And I think you've known that words matter for some time. While Pluto has been in Aquarius, a very communicative part of the Sagittarian horoscope. So while Pluto has been in Aquarius, you've understood the importance of correct communication. Maybe you've even been quite obsessed about it. And so as the moon moves into Virgo, it makes this quincunx aspect with Pluto. So there's you trying to make an impression, but there's you also considering how to make an impression and how best to communicate who you are. Now, you mustn't think about it too much, especially as you're a Sagittarius. Spontaneity really does matter. It's so important that you don't spend ages thinking about things. You just have to just do it. But then this may be a little passing moments of concern. Are you doing it the right way? Are you saying the right things? So you perhaps need to go through that. And Sagittarius, it's just very important that you're not too self-conscious. You've got to be a little bit self-conscious. There's no harm in being a bit self-conscious, because you've got to have some awareness of what impact you're having on the world around you, and you can't just say what you like. But if you're too self-conscious, then the words just don't come out, and you get nowhere. But you're a Sagittarius. I think that that is something that you know very well. Capricorn. You are possibly, Capricorn, the cleverest and most talented person at the moment. I mean, it changes, but right now I think you're on really good form, and I think that your abilities are just quite obvious. Well, they certainly should be obvious to you, because you're the person that really matters. So it's just so important that you don't doubt yourself. And that's, of course, is something that every Capricorn can do, because Capricorn is a modest sign. It doesn't like to sing its own praises. That's not how Capricorn works. But right now, you have the necessary skills, and it's all coming together. And in fact, the one thing that can spoil it is your own modesty. Telling yourself it's not worth the effort, no one's interested, no one cares. That's a very saturnine approach, but it's not right at the moment, because really, Capricorn, you've got so much to offer, and in a way there is perhaps an obligation to offer it. So maybe what you need is to just take everything you are, everything that you're good at, and to distill it, to just make it real, make it even more real than it is than usual. And it just then can be absolutely obvious and apparent, and people will just take you seriously. If you give people a chance to take you seriously, they will. And don't be afraid of getting praise. It's okay to get praised. It's good to get praised. And if you get praise, that's great. It makes you feel good. Okay, if you don't get praise, it doesn't matter, because as a Capricorn, you do know that it is all about you. But one thing I am telling you, as I've said before, is that of all the 12 signs, you are the cleverest and the most talented. So you're getting praise from me, and so make absolute maximum use of that. These kind of opportunities, okay, they are part of you. They're always part of you, but the opportunity is right here, and it's right now. So really, Capricorn, do try to take advantage of it. At the same time, consider your social environment. People are changing. The moon is ruler of Cancer, which is your opposite sign, and the moon is changing sign. It's moving from Leo into Virgo. Perhaps some people have been keeping themselves to themselves recently. They haven't wanted to show themselves, but they're prepared to change, especially as the moon goes into Virgo. People are wanting a little more attention, and they have got something to offer. Yeah, you, Capricorn, have got loads to offer, but some people have themselves got stuff to offer. They might give you a slightly different view, and perhaps that's what you need, Capricorn. You need to be seen, to be shown a slightly different side to life. And if you can mix with people who have a different experience from you, have a different knowledge base than you, then I think that you're very much going to be able to benefit from that. And try not to pass judgment on new things. So you might be told about new things that you don't really know much about, and perhaps your immediate response is to question it, to perhaps suggest that it's unrealistic, that maybe it's too expensive, costs too much money, costs too much time. You may be right. At some level, you probably are right. But still, you need to perhaps consider what you're being told and process it. And maybe you can give some useful feedback, but it's always got to be constructive feedback, because you just can't be negative for the sake of being negative, particularly on a day like this. It's a day when you have the talent, when you have the skills, and part of having talent and skills is being able to take something from the outside world which may in itself be unrealistic, but being able to turn it into something which actually could be the basis for something very possible. I mean, it could happen. It could be a real possibility. And your constructive approach can make it real. And perhaps that's what being a Capricorn is all about. Taking things which are perhaps unreal and making them real. And yeah, Capricorn, you can do it. Aquarius. There's been a recent focus on other people in the Aquarian chart, and this is because the moon has been moving through Leo. Of course, Leo is your opposite sign. And with the moon moving through Leo, there have been people to deal with. And at the same time, you've just been very aware of what impact the world has had on you. But, for better or for worse, that just can't really be avoided. And as the moon moves into late Leo, it does make a square to Uranus. Now, that square to Uranus, you're going to feel, particularly if you are in Australia or New Zealand or Eastern Asia. I think you might feel it a little bit if you're in Europe. I think you'll feel it to some extent. And with that moon square Uranus, it just may occur to you that not everyone can be trusted. It's not that they're deceptive or untrustworthy, but can just be trusted to be reliable. Yeah, some people are just unreliable, and that becomes very clear to you. And so you do perhaps have to pick and choose. You can't be with everyone, and some people should be avoided. And that's just the way it is, and perhaps that's part of a learning process that perhaps you've experienced as the moon has moved through Leo over the last couple of days. You can see how things on the outside having an impact on you, and that impact isn't always fortunate. It can be quite disturbing, and so perhaps you need to have a greater sense of discernment. Go to places and hang out with people who you can rely on and who are trustworthy. But this moon square Uranus, if you're in the Americas, I don't think it's such a big deal. And I think that as the day progresses, you find that the moon moves out of Leo and it moves into Virgo. So with the moon moving into Virgo, there is a change, and I feel that many Aquarians are going to be taking themselves more and more seriously as the day progresses. You will perhaps take the view that you live in a serious world. It's not a time for being light-hearted. There are serious things to consider. There are certain details that you perhaps haven't been taken seriously recently, but now is a time to really start to focus. And the moon, as it moves through Virgo, it does make a quincunx aspect with Pluto. Of course, Pluto is right at the beginning of your sign. Pluto is in early Aquarius, so that quincunx aspect, they are 150 degrees apart, the moon and Pluto. So that moon-Pluto quincunx is going to encourage you, to take yourself super seriously and perhaps to dig deep. Now, there is a danger that if you take yourself seriously, you could just take yourself seriously. I'm a serious person, and just leave it at that. But if you're going to take yourself seriously, then you've actually got to do something with that seriousness. And that means engaging in serious tasks, being, for example, really prepared to get to the bottom of things and not leaving any stone unturned. So we're talking about perhaps research or asking deep questions. And also it's about tuning into everything that you are. I think that maybe at the moment, Aquarius, you may have certain abilities that you are not using. They've fallen by the wayside for one reason or another, and you perhaps don't think they're important, or you perhaps feel that the world has moved on, they're now irrelevant. But as you dig deeper into yourself, you start to be able to tune into these abilities. They become aware, but you become very aware of them. You might still feel that they're unimportant, but the more you look into yourself, the more you see what you can do, and the more you see what you're capable of doing. And this might lead into the possibility of some kind of personal transformation. Now, we can't expect a personal transformation over one day, but it's more about giving you a picture of what it means for Pluto to be in Aquarius. So Pluto's been in Aquarius for some time. It temporarily leaves Aquarius in the autumn, but it comes back into Aquarius, and then it stays there for years and years and years. And this is your time. This is a time when Aquarians really are able to be themselves and to understand how special they are. And today is just one of those days when you're just getting an image of what can be. So work on this image. Okay, it might go away tomorrow, but it's there for the moment. So perhaps take some notes, because you're getting an idea about the future. The future is in front of you. You're seeing it. You're seeing evidence of the future. So do take note of what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling. Pisces. The moon is starting to move into Virgo, which is your opposite sign. That might have some connection with relationships. So you may become aware of how other people influence your life. I mean, you know that. I mean, you're a Pisces. It's the sea. It's the water. You move from one way to another. You move in one direction, you move into another direction. You're just so used to people having an influence on you. And the thing is, it needn't have any impact on you whatsoever. Influence is just something temporary. It's like the nudgings of the tide, moving you one way, moving you the other way, but you're still the same person. You're not overwhelmed by it because you're used to this kind of situation. But right now, with the moon moving into Virgo, it does make an 150-degree aspect to Pluto, and I think that you might somewhat resent it when people try to have an impact on you. They may not even be trying. It may just be your perception that, whenever you're with someone, you somehow have to give something up. I think that is not real. I don't think you're having to give something up. I don't think you're having to keep anything really secure, and because you're terrified that you might be compromised. I think you can be a little relaxed, a little more relaxed when dealing with people. But I think there is a defensiveness which may be making itself apparent today. I mean, I don't want to read too much into it. The moon quincunx Pluto is a minor aspect. It doesn't last so very long, but it's something that you might feel, especially if you're in the Americas, Europe, maybe later in the day. I don't think it's an issue if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But yeah, there could be a little bit of defensiveness there, which I think you need to guard against. Yeah, a bit of defensiveness is always a good idea, but too much defensiveness and you just get nothing done. And Pisces, don't underestimate your power and your ability to protect yourself. You can protect yourself without having to make a fuss about it, without having to create drama. And in fact, you're going to be actually quite good at getting through to other people, and perhaps being able to sort of breach other people's boundaries if you want to. I suppose you're a Pisces. I mean, you're the water, can seep through anything. So if anything is trying to hold you back, is trying to keep you at a distance, and you feel you want to breach the seawalls, I think you can. Though you have to ask yourself why, what are you trying to do, what are you trying to achieve. But you, Pisces, may regard it just as being an important issue. It may be a power issue. And I think the concept of power is going to be important today. You don't want to be overpowered by other people, but at the same token, you want to be taken seriously. You want to have an influence. You can have an influence, but first of all, you perhaps have to be influenced by others a little bit, because where you get influenced, that creates a line of communication and a line of understanding, and then you can start to have your impact, and it can be a powerful impact, and hopefully it can be a constructive impact. Though, Pisces, I think it is important that you do have the same respect for other people's boundaries as you expect other people to have for your boundaries. But overall, Pisces, I'm not actually suggesting that it's an especially dramatic, amazing day. As I said, right at the beginning when I was introducing the broad astrological scene, the astrological picture, I didn't think much was going on today. And that was why I was hoping to make my forecast for the 12 signs briefer than usual. I'm not quite sure if I've succeeded in that, but I don't expect amazing things to happen. But one way or another, boundaries could be important. And that's it with my forecast for the 12 signs. And I am now going to switch to the I Ching. And I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for watching what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 57, the gentle. So it seems a nice hexagram, doesn't it? The gentle. It's about trying to understand things. trying to understand what's wrong with things, trying to get into every nook and cranny, like the wind, to get to the bottom of a problem. And so perhaps that's what we're doing. We're dealing with the world, and we can see the world in all its wonder, but we're also aware of all the problems. And yeah, we want to understand what's going on, because we take the view that if we can understand what's going on, then we can make things better. And if things have been going wrong in the past, we perhaps need to find out the source of the problem, or the problems in the plural. And we have two moving lines here. And these moving lines are not great. So we do have the third line from the bottom moving. And very often in the I Ching, the third line from the bottom is not fortunate. And there is a view that, we are in a situation where we are unsure. We don't know what to do. We feel that something needs to be done, but we want to make sure that we do the right thing. And it's hard work. What actually do? We absolutely don't want to get it wrong. And so we think about it. We get advice. We get other opinions. And we still find ourselves going round and round in circles. And in fact, there's a danger here that we might hesitate for so long that we miss the moment and actually nothing happens. And we end up in a situation which things just get worse. And even if we are able to take any action, is it going to be effective? So it's a bit of an insoluble problem here. It's not easy. Perhaps there are no good solutions. Though I must remind you, this is just a hexagram for today. So we can't do nothing, because if we do nothing, we'll miss the moment. But if we do something, we might just get it wrong and not adopt the right approach. Now, I suppose we could take the view that we're not going to do anything. We're just going to wait. We're going to allow the situation to develop. But that's not going to be ideal either. So you do have to be very careful in terms of what you decide. You can't, whatever you're going to decide, even if you decide to do nothing, you've got to decide relatively quickly, because what will make things really bad is the very action of being indecisive. That indecision is going to take up a lot of time, it's going to cause a lot of stress, and it's going to make matters worse, and perhaps the universe will just see you being indecisive. So make a decision, and if you decide to do nothing, then make a clear decision to do nothing. Then we have the top line moving, and in a way the top line is kind of more of the same. Top line again is another line which is not particularly fortunate. It may be a situation where we overanalyze something. So if there's a problem, we might spend a long time thinking about it. We may even feel that we have to confront someone. I mean, that seems obvious, isn't it? Okay, we might be confronting ourselves if a problem lies with ourselves, but it could be we feel we have to confront another person. And we may have identified the problem correctly. We might have identified the source of a problem, and we might think, okay, let's just confront the source of a problem and be done with it. But the I Ching is really suggesting that's not a good idea. If we do confront the source of our problem, of whatever this problem is, then this could make things much worse. It's almost like we're getting to the heart of darkness. And yeah, we might feel it's good to get to the heart of darkness, but if we get too close to the heart of darkness, we might lose everything. And so that might be a reason not to take things too far, to know when to back off. And this is just a reminder that this is potentially a dangerous situation. And I'm really wary of hyperbole, dangerous situation. I do a hexagram every single day, so I do an I Ching reading every single day. So try to use a little bit of imagination. What is bothering you? It may be something relatively trivial, something that is not about dangerous situations. But of course, I can't do these I Ching readings to look at every single one of you's individual situations. That I suppose is the limitations of the format. But anyway, this hexagram, the gentle, it does transform, it does move, and it moves to the abysmal 29. And the abysmal sounds bad, but actually it's not that bad. The abysmal is certainly about a dangerous situation, but the I Ching talks about a repeated danger. It's a dangerous situation that we're familiar with. We know it's dangerous. And because we know it's dangerous, we're not going to do anything stupid. And part of the advice with the abysmal is to just go with the flow. Let gravity take its course. And so if we allow gravity to take its course, and we don't try and force it, we will be able to gingerly get round the problem. And the abysmal is, of course, talking about pits. And what we don't want to do is fall in the pits. And if we do run into a problem, if we do fall into a pit, don't try too hard to get out. In the end, help will be available. Just go with the flow. And so, looking at this I Ching reading overall, it's a difficult situation, but in the end, it does move to the abysmal, which is about a solution. We will find a way out. So don't panic here. Just tread carefully and go with the line of least resistance, and I think in the end things will be okay. And now I want to consider France and its elections. So we had elections on Sunday, and we had two rounds. So we had the first round was on June the 30th. The second round was on July the 7th. And so, first round, Marine Le Pen and her national rally did well, but the second round, sort of people on the left and the centre, they panicked, and candidates dropped out. It was all about stop Le Pen, stop Le Pen. This is what was always going to happen. This is the way the French system worked, and people got excited about Le Pen becoming prime minister, but there was never any realistic chance of it happening. And turning to the chart, I believe these are the charts of the closing of the polls. I just must emphasize, I am focusing on the astrology, and if you're from France, and I'm sure you know the system much better than me, but if I get some details wrong about France, my apologies. But again, this is not a political channel. So, as I understand it, this is a chart of the closing of the polls on July the 7th. And closing of the polls, we see Jupiter in the 7th. I mean, I suppose that's Jupiter in the 7th. Well, Macron describes himself as Jupiter, doesn't he? I don't know. Does he describe himself as Jupiter? I mean, other people call him Jupiter. So it's kind of interesting that Jupiter is in such a prominent place at the closing of the polls. Maybe this is a sign that Macron, in some ways, has got his way. I mean, Jupiter is in a mixed position. Jupiter might be in its detriment because it rules Sagittarius, but so it's in its detriment in Gemini. On the other hand, there are these minor dignities, terms and face. So Jupiter is in its own terms, using the Egyptian terms, and Jupiter is also has dignity by face. So Jupiter is not in a bad position there, and so that might indicate Macron in that chart. Perhaps this is what he wanted. Perhaps it's not what he wanted. We don't quite know what Macron did want and what he was planning, but he's not. By all accounts, he's not going anywhere. From what there was talk about him resigning, but there can't be another election for another year. So I wanted to consider how it might be impacting some of the people involved in this. So the obvious one is Marine Le Pen. So I've always had issues with Marine Le Pen's chart, and I just sort of feel that with Marine Le Pen that there is something tragic about her horoscope. I'm not giving any sort of political opinions here, just looking at the chart. So in terms of the tragedy of Marine Le Pen's chart, she's got a terrible Saturn, actually. Her Saturn's in Aries. It's a sign of its fall, and it's square Mars. Her Mars is, by the way, Mars has its degree of exaltation at 28 Capricorn. So Mars at 29:49 Cancer is very close to its degree of its fall. So that doesn't help. She's got this Mars-Saturn square. Now, in Indian astrology, there is this thing called Dikbala, which is directional strength, as if Saturn is in the seventh in the Vedic chart. But unfortunately, in the Vedic chart, it's true that her descendant goes back into Pisces, her seventh house, but her Saturn stays in Aries. So in the Vedic chart, her Saturn is not in the seventh, so she doesn't get the advantage of Dikbala. And so I think with that Saturn in Aries, conjunct Mars, I think there's a lot for her that I think is very tough, and I think it's just very difficult for her to get results. And I don't think she's helped by the fact that she's got the South Node on the ascendant, and I think that is connected perhaps with her reputation. And I don't think that there's perhaps anything that necessarily she has done wrong, but the point is she can change the party as much as she likes, but she's still got the legacy of her father to deal with. And when we look at that Saturn in Aries, in Western astrology, the father is the fourth house. It's not the 10th house, it's the fourth house. And so her father, on the IC, 19 Capricorn. And so what's ruler of her IC? A fourth house. Whether you use whole signs or Placidus houses, it doesn't matter, but you've still got Capricorn on the fourth house cusp. That's her father, Saturn. What was his name? Jean-Marie Le Pen. He's represented by Saturn. So with that South Node on the ascendant and Saturn in the seventh, she's just constantly undermined by the past, and that's why I think that to an extent there is a bit of a tragedy to her chart. And turning to the elections and how the elections impacted her, I think there's a fairly mixed picture, but I think perhaps the real issue is maybe what Uranus was doing. So at the time of the elections, Uranus was at 26 degrees 1 minute Taurus. So Uranus was square her Venus. So I suppose Venus is perhaps how she is presenting herself. She's got Venus in Leo. You could say relatively close to Regulus. I mean, she's got her Regulus and natal Venus about 4 degrees off Regulus. That's it's quite a way. But with that Uranus square Venus, it's a bit of a shock, this whole period for her, and it could be somewhat troublesome. And if she had become prime minister, how easy would it have actually been? Still, you can't argue that she got some prominence here. The sun was relatively close to her midheaven. Venus was at 25. Was at 25 Cancer. So Venus was on her midheaven. Yeah, she's certainly getting a lot of attention. But I do think that Uranus represents a bit of a problem, and also Saturn at 19. There's Saturn at 19 Pisces. Opposition her Pluto. I don't know if that's a particularly big deal, having Saturn opposition her Pluto. So, I mean, there was nothing really super dramatic there. I suppose you could also notice that Chiron is conjunct her Saturn. You could see Chiron being a kind of a rejection, and it's on her transing Chiron conjunct her Saturn. Saturn is, I believe, is about many of the things holding her back, her past, and sort of Chiron is about the rejection that has perhaps come about from her past and from her reputation. Then there is her protege, Jourdain Bardella. So Jourdain Bardella, he has quite an interesting chart, at least in terms of now, because he's got his Saturn return. So Jourdain Bardella, he's only 28 years old, so this is a big election. He's had a central role in it, and we can see how it might have been somewhat difficult for him, because Saturn has just gone stationary retrograde. What was it, 1926? Pisces, 1926 Pisces. He has Saturn in Pisces in his own chart. So if we look at Bardella and the French elections, what the transits he was experiencing, it really was for him a Saturn return event. I know that he hasn't even had his exact Saturn return yet, but there's his Saturn at 21-25 Pisces, so Saturn is at 19-23 Pisces, so it might have been a real time of having to face reality. And look at his sun. His sun is at 2018 Virgo, and Sun opposition Saturn. I suppose this is a man who is very hard-working, who takes life seriously. He's a Virgo. He wants to get everything right. So Saturn opposition his Sun, conjunct his Saturn. This is tough. And then what would Saturn be doing? Once it goes stationary direct and into next year, Saturn will be opposition his Venus. So with that Saturn, would this have been a great time for the National Rally to have formed a government, particularly with him having Saturn opposition his Sun? Maybe there is a conspiracy theory that perhaps that was the intention. Maybe Macron was hoping that the National Rally would win, and because we've got economic issues, other issues. You'd have street protests. There are always going to be street protests, aren't there, in France? And it could if they'd been in government, it could have completely discredited the National Rally. So you could argue that the National Rally were kind of fortunate that they didn't form the government, that they were kind of defeated in this election. You know, especially with him, with Saturn. If Jourdain Bardella is such an important figure in the National Rally, Marine Le Pen's protege, and he was about to go into this dreadful situation of having to share government with Macron and take the blame for all the chaos and disaster that may be about to unfold. This way, you could argue that him and Marine Le Pen and their party can just bide their time. And yeah, I think with his Saturn return, he perhaps needs to think things through. And now is not a time for him to be taking the reins of government. Now there's someone else to consider, and that is Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And he is head of La France Insoumise, which I believe means something like rebellious France. And he's this major left-wing party. They say far left. I don't know what far left means, but here is the chart of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Obviously, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is violently opposed to Marine Le Pen and to the National Rally, but he's not a big fan of Macron either. So here is this other figure in French politics. You can see he's quite old, relatively speaking, 1951, so he's about to turn 73. But still, he's now a major figure in French politics. And notice how this Virgo keeps turning up. You know, we just looked at Jourdain Bardella, and he had these planets in Virgo. Marine Le Pen had Jupiter in Virgo, but he's got Virgo rising, and he's got Mercury conjunct Venus in Virgo. He's got Moon on a descendant, and so he's this major figure. Yet Saturn is on his descendant. Neptune is on his descendant. So he's got Neptune is now retrograde, moving back onto his descendant. He has got he's recently had Saturn opposition his Venus, so he's going to have, by next year, he's going to have Saturn on his descendant, and he's going to have Saturn on his moon next year. So this is going to be a difficult time for him. I don't know what his plans are. We don't really know how it's going to work out. We don't know what who's going to be prime minister. And I don't know how French politics works. It's a bit difficult for me to speculate, even if I have astrology to use astrology. And another thing next year is that next year we have Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries. So there's his Saturn at 0 degrees Libra. And so he's going to have Saturn opposition Saturn. He's going to have Neptune opposition Saturn. So whatever he's doing, it's going to be a difficult time for him. Oh, look at his Mars. It's 0 degrees 35 Leo. Same degree as Zelensky, by the way. So he's going to have Pluto opposition his Mars later in the year. So for Mélenchon, the planets are really converging on him, at least by transit. And he is going to, I think, be under a huge amount of pressure. I don't know whether he can be prime minister, but if he does become prime minister, well, that would be fun with all these transits coming up. Or maybe it's someone else, one of his proteges. We don't really quite know how it's going to work, but we would have expected a fair amount of chaos there. And then we had to think about Emmanuel Macron. I've looked at Emmanuel Macron's horoscope quite a lot. And my general view on Macron's horoscope at the moment is that it's under a lot of pressure. He has got a Sun-Mercury conjunction at 29 Sagittarius. So that means that he's got Neptune square his Sun and Neptune square his Mercury. And so Neptune is causing all sorts of problems for Macron. And one has to really wonder about whether Macron is able to make the right decisions. I think that the answer is basically no. I think that Macron is a fundamentally unstable person. And look at he's got his moon opposition Uranus at the moment. I mean, he's got moon opposition Uranus in his natal chart. So I don't think that's particularly helpful. And we're now seeing the complete instability of Macron, and the fact that Neptune is transiting Neptune. You see, the thing about Neptune, why Neptune is causing so many problems for Emmanuel Macron, is it's not just that Neptune is making a square to his Sun-Venus conjunction. It's also the fact that Neptune is making a semi-square to his moon, and it's making a sesquiquadrate to his Uranus. So Neptune is hitting the most sensitive point in his chart, and it's hitting it in a really, really major way. And I just do not think that Macron is able to make clear decisions at the moment. And at the moment, yeah, it is particularly bad. That doesn't mean to say he's going anywhere, but one wonders about his decision to call this election, and how is it actually going to work out. Looking at Emmanuel Macron's solar arc directions, by the way, for the election, I mean, nothing may be super dramatic here, but we do notice that Mars is at 28-26, directed Mars is at 28-26 Virgo. So Mars is making its way to a square with the Sun. Now, that square to the Sun is not going to actually be exact for another year, but as soon as it makes the square to the Sun, it will also start making a square to Mercury. It will be making a sesquiquadrate to his Moon. It will be making a semi-square to his Uranus. So it's really going, that directed Mars is something we need to watch out for, and I think it could cause a lot of problems, certainly in a year's time, if he's still around in a year's time, which I suppose he probably will be, won't he? Not that I know a great deal about French politics, as I do emphasize. So that's Macron's chart, and then there is the question about how all of this is impacting the horoscope of France. And then the question is, what is the horoscope of France? So the horoscope I was using last time I looked at France was the horoscope of the storming of the Bastille. And this was, July the 14th, 1789. I've gone for 1:30 p.m. I don't think that's necessarily the time. And I got some criticism for using the Bastille as the horoscope of France, because apparently French astrologers like to use a different chart. But at the very least, what we can say about the storming of the Bastille is that Saturn is at 2310 Pisces. So looking at Jourdain Bardella's Saturn, he has Saturn conjunct the Bastille's Saturn. And so they have Saturn conjunct Saturn. And the French Revolution chart is having a Saturn return, and that Saturn return will happen next year, as will Jourdain Bardella. But what about the other charts? And which chart do we take? Now, looking at AstroTheme, AstroTheme, if you look up France on AstroTheme, you get the horoscope for the referendum on the Constitution, which was sort of the beginning of the Fifth Republic. So I'm not saying this is the chart for France, but it is one possible chart. So you've got this. It's a Libra chart. You've got Sun at 5-3 Libra, and you've got planets in Virgo, and it's also, you've also got you haven't got Saturn in Pisces, but you do have Saturn at 20 degrees 6 Sagittarius. So now that's Saturn at 26 degrees Sagittarius, regardless of whether you take the referendum chart of September the 28th, if you take the promulgation chart of October the 4th, or the Nick Campion chart when it was actually finally sealed, was October the 6th, Saturn is going to be around 20 degrees Sagittarius. So it's going to be... So Saturn went stationary direct pretty close to the Fifth Republic's Saturn. And if you take the referendum chart, we can see that Saturn is going to be hitting the Mercury and Venus in Virgo next year. So that is definitely going to be happening. But we've got other charts to consider. Now, I do not know the time for the promulgation chart. So if you're a French astrologer, you probably do. So my apologies for not having this. So here's a chart which I think most French astrologers use. I don't know the time. You probably do know the time if you're a French astrologer. But again, we can see Saturn at 20 degrees 27 Sagittarius, and the planets have moved out of Virgo. So the referendum chart had quite a lot of planets in Virgo, but this is a chart for noon, but I don't know. Venus has now gone into Libra. Mercury is in Libra, but still, it's the Saturn that matters. Perhaps potentially Moon opposition Saturn. I think very likely that we've got so that from the October the 4th chart, Saturn will went stationary retrograde, not just square Saturn but square Moon. So we can see there are still Saturn problems there. And look at there's that Uranus at 15 Leo. The Uranus will be in 50 because it's a slow mover. Uranus will be in 15 Leo in all of those charts. So that Uranus in 15 Leo is is square Macron's Moon and square Macron's Uranus. So it's like, in a way, France is too revolutionary for Macron. It's too much for Macron, really. That's perhaps the reality of the situation. And finally, we have the Nick Campion chart, which I believe is a chart that Nick Campion suggested in the Book of World Horoscopes, I think. That's October the 6th, 1958, and I've gone for 6:30 p.m. Liz Green has a write-up of the French horoscope on astro.com, and she uses this time. And so the chart is like even more of a Libra chart. And again, there's that Saturn. So the thing is with that Saturn is, okay, so we know that Saturn is square Saturn. Also with these early Libra planets, that matters because remember, next year, Saturn goes into Aries and Neptune goes into Aries. So Saturn and Neptune are going to be opposition France's Venus, and then they're going to move on and hit and go opposition France's other Libra planets, assuming you take either the October the 4th or the October the 6th chart. So I think we can see problems building up there. And finally, I should say something about an event which we have the anniversary, the 39th anniversary tomorrow on the 10th. And I'm just wondering if we can see any of these French charts showing up for the event. And this event was a blowing up of a rainbow warrior in Auckland Harbour. And so this was a ship operated by Greenpeace. France didn't like it. It was messing with their nuclear tests. And so they decided to blow it up. And a photographer was on board, drowned as a result of this. And so this is a chart of the explosion. And notice that Neptune is on the midheaven. I mean, it's kind of quite close to the midheaven for the chart of the explosion. Sun-Mars conjunction, exactly what you'd expect for an explosion, right at the bottom of the chart. So that's, I suppose, the boat sinking. So I do think that chart does fit well. And turning to the lunation before the explosion, this is the lunation for July the 3rd, 1985. So again, you've got a Moon-Neptune conjunction on the midheaven. There's a full moon right across the midheaven, set for Auckland, and that really does fit. That does fit the explosion. Now you will see that was just after midnight. The ascendant at the time of the full moon was at 6 degrees 1 minute Aries, set for Auckland. And if we go back to the Rainbow Warrior, likewise, we had 6 degrees Aries in both charts rising. So the full moon prior to the explosion, we had 6 degrees Aries rising. The time of the explosion, 6 degrees Aries rising. So that means that on a descendant, we've got 6 degrees 15 Libra. So you could say that 6 degrees 15 Libra represents the enemy, the aggressor, French agents causing problems. And going back to the horoscope of the referendum, this is the horoscope for the referendum, the close of polls, I think. And so the sun is at 5 degrees Libra. So that's pretty close to the descendant of a Rainbow Warrior. So you could argue that sort of suggests French hands are on the matter. Although I suppose going to the October the 4th chart, it's not so good. The sun is at 10 degrees Libra, and so go to October the 6th, it's 12 degrees Libra. But all of these charts for the 1958 Constitution, for the Fifth Republic, have Libra, have the sun in Libra, have quite a lot of planets in Libra. And it's just interesting that Libra was on descendant at the time of the blowing up of the Rainbow Warrior. I will be looking at France again. I'm just getting some information about the election. I perhaps need to do some more research, but as we've just had the election results, I thought I should make some effort to cover it. So I hope you found that video of some interest. If you did find it interesting, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you are not subscribed, of course, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.